listing the 4 chief virtues: wisdom, justice, fortitude, and temperance. As I read the list, I knew I had none of them. But I have other virtues, Father. Ambition. That can be a virtue when it drives us to excel. Resourcefulness, courage. Perhaps not on the battlefield, but there are many forms of courage. Devotion to my family, to you. But none of my virtues were on your list.
Okay, so he mentioned the 4 cardinal virtues. If you are familiar with that story, Marcus Aurelius was the emperor of Rome that time. He was a philosopher king, someone who is an ideal leader according to Plato. He's a king, at the same time a philosopher, someone who thinks. It is a rare trait of leaders that they're both very good administrators and at the same time thinkers, right? Philosophers. And he enumerated the 4 cardinal virtues: prudence, justice, fortitude, and temperance. We're going to tackle them later. So that is the context upon which we're going to have the talk for today. Now, I'd like to start with a quotation from a Dutch lawyer. His name is Hugo Grotius. He said, "A man cannot govern a nation if he cannot govern a city. He cannot govern a city if he cannot govern a family. He cannot govern a family unless he can govern himself. He cannot govern himself unless his passions are subject to reason." Since we're talking here about leadership, we're talking about governing something, it's good for us to understand very well what he said at the end. If you cannot govern yourself unless your passions are subject to reason, it may be difficult for you to govern other people. What more the nation, right? And so please something strange on the computer because my okay. Now, if you are following the talks that we've been having, we're now on pages 14 to 27 of Back to the Basics. By the way, thank you to MG for this beautiful presentation. Right? In page 14 of that book, which you all have, we said there that virtues are those stable dispositions that make a person good or do good. Right? Since we're talking about making a foundation for nation building, right? And the foundation is composed of 3 parts that we spoke about last week. Last week we tackled the steel component, which is excellence and sense of duty. So today we're going to tackle the gravel, sand, and pebble components. Right? If you notice, those are many. Those are small things that compose the character of a person. Right? So we liken them to virtues. Right? But first, you have to distinguish values from virtues. Right? What are values? You know, values are things that we hold dear in life. Like I value wearing a suit over a barong, for example. Well, that's not really true. It's just that I'm here. I cannot wear a barong here, otherwise I will freeze, right? And so there are things that you hold dear in life, but some of them are subjective and some of them are objective, right? The objective ones are what we call moral values. They're always present. They are timeless. They are true all the time. They don't depend on a particular cultural setting, for example, or what you feel at the moment, right? But non-moral values are subjective. They depend from person to person. My favorite example is your choice, for example, to go to eat in Jollibee is a non-moral value compared to someone who wants to eat in McDonald's, for example, right? So it doesn't make you a better person if you eat in Jollibee over McDonald's, right? But moral values are the ones that affect you from within, right? And so now, a constant repetition of those values, of those moral values, are the ones that build your virtue, right? In short, when we talk about virtues, if you're going to go to the very simple definition of it, these are good habits, and these are the moral virtues that you keep on repeating in such a way that they become second nature to you, right? So we call them good habits. And the opposite is true. When you keep on doing something that is bad, right, and they become second nature to you, we call them your vices. No? These are bad habits, right? Now, if you're going to look at this diagram, if there's something that I would like you to remember, I always tell you about this, is that if you want to develop character, good character, you can see that on the fifth box, right? There's an entire process before that, right? First, everything that enters your mind, the thoughts that you have, the desires that you have, they enter through your senses, right? You know that we have external senses, sight, taste, hearing, smelling, right? These are external senses. And you have your internal senses, your imagination, your memory, your sensus communis, for example. So all these things, they form your senses, right? They enter your senses, and then they form your thoughts, the things that enter your mind, right? If you want to think good of others, you have to make sure that the things that enter your senses are good things, right? Your desires, right? If you've watched Silence of the Lambs, one of the clues that was given to the investigator was the thing that the person keeps on seeing is the one that he desired, right? The skin of fat ladies, right? And so, why? Because he allowed those things to enter his senses, right? Then you start to desire them, right? The things that you say, the things that you do, right? So for example, if there's a bad habit that you have that you want to get rid of, make sure that your senses are not supplied with those things that habit keep on, the computer, I'm distracted with the computer, is acting up again. So with those bad things that may enter your senses, right? Why? Because those things keep on, they develop your habit. I mean, if that habit is good, I can again look at the diagram, I can point it because the computer is not working. They become your virtue, and your character is it's like a summation, it's like a combination of those things, those habits that you have, right? And then they form your lifestyle, the way you live your life, the way you the others see you, right? And now the thing is, how do you know that you have acquired a particular virtue or a particular vice? It's when you don't realize anymore that you are doing them, that they become second nature to you. They become part of you. That's why we always say that the dirty old man, DOM, we always say about, some people say that in the offices, is a person who doesn't notice that he's dirty. Why? Because it becomes second nature for him to be dirty, to be vicious, for example. Yeah. And also with virtue. And you know that you don't acquire habit overnight, right? And that's why we devote a lot of time giving these talks to young people, because we think that you're in a position right now in your life when you develop those habits, right? And why? It doesn't mean that you cannot acquire habits when you're old. You can, right? But it may take time. So that's why it's good to start younger, right? So why is that important? I hope this video will come out. It does not. Okay, it is not. So I'm supposed to show you a video about starting to acquire the virtues at a younger stage. Okay. Okay. First, you have to understand yourself deeply. So now we're on the point of how to acquire these virtues, right? First, you have to really understand yourself deeply. Remember about clarity that we talked about last time, right? And for that to happen, remember this quotation from Hugo Grotius. We're talking here about leadership. We're forming future leaders of our country right now, right? And it's hard for you to govern anything unless your passions are subject to reason. What does that mean, right? I hope this plays. If it does not work, sorry. Okay, I just explain it. That one of the things that you have to remember about yourself is that you're composed of body and soul, you're not just body, right? The problem is some people think when you talk about soul, you're talking about religion necessarily. No. In fact, I had attended a conference in the US some years ago. One of the speakers said that we have a philosophical poverty here because when people talk about the spirit, they think that we're talking about religion. He said, no. When you talk about, you know, there are some things that you cannot grasp, that you cannot touch. They're not material, but they exist. For example, love. Love is something that you just know it's there, right? In fact, there's a French philosopher who said that love has its reasons that uh, the heart has its reasons that the mind cannot grasp, right? And so that's important for you as a leader. You have to know that you're made up of body and soul, right? And for this, we can compare ourselves with those other creatures that have bodies, right? What is that soul? Soul is the principle of life. Principle is a philosophical term. It's a metaphysical term, which means that from which something else arises. And that's why I always joke, well, I would tell my students in biology when I was still teaching biology, we usually get frogs and teeth them, right? To study the different body organs. And I always ask them, do you think frogs have souls, right? And then they're shocked when I say, yes, they have souls. For example, plants, you know, their souls are called vegetative souls. Even Aristotle spoke about this. They have their own faculties. They have nutrition. They manufacture their own food through photosynthesis. They have growth, unless you stunt their growth. When you make bonsai, for example, they have reproduction, asexual and sexual reproduction in plants, right? Animals, they have what you call sentient souls. These are souls that, aside from nutrition, growth, and reproduction, some animals have locomotion, but more than that, they have what you call emotions and feelings. You know, that's why you have a particular relation with some animals, for example, like some dogs. Here, there are more animals, there are more pets in the Netherlands than people, for example. And there's a certain connection. There's an emotional attachment you can have with an animal, for example. They have sensitive. Then how about man? Humans have, okay, when I hear a message, I check my phone because it's the only way for me to know if there's something going on right or not. Okay, so humans, we have, aside from nutrition, growth, and reproduction, we have also emotions, right? But what makes us different from animals? Right? There are two faculties that makes us different. We have intellect and free will. That's why I always tell people, sometimes you make a decision, you find it very difficult. Am I gonna do this or what? What do you feel about it, right? I usually tell them, why don't you use the faculty that is proper to you as a human person? Your intellect and free will. It is important for you to know that you have an emotional attachment towards that thing or towards that person, for example. But think about it. So, for example, you're married and you're attracted to a woman, right? You have to think about it. You know, I'm already a married person, right? I cannot have, you know, a romantic relationship with another lady, right? Although emotionally, or you know, your feelings tell you, you know, you feel attracted to that lady, then you have to use your intellect, right? And then your will choose accordingly, right? And so that's important for you to understand as a leader, right? You cannot just be driven by emotions. Otherwise, what makes you different from an animal, right? So now we were at the start of this movie, at the start of this talk, we saw the movie of a clip of Gladiator when Commodus, the supposed successor of Marcus Aurelius, listed the 4 cardinal virtues: prudence, justice, fortitude, temperance. Even those philosophers before the coming of Christ were already talking about these 4 cardinal virtues. These are virtues from which all the other virtues can be traced back, right? So they're like the hinges of a door. You know, a door has hinges. So these are prudence, justice, fortitude, temperance. And they reside in the different faculties of the soul. For example, the prudence perfects the intellect. It talks about you think before you act, right? Justice perfects the will, that you give others their due, although you may not feel good about it, right? Fortitude regulates your irascible appetite. It's appetite that makes you do things that are difficult to do, right? You need, and temperance there regulates your concupiscible appetite, right? Things that are more or less easy to do, but they have to be regulated, right? And these are things that if you want to perfect yourself as a person, these are four things, four virtues that constitute the different other virtues that you'll be living in your lives, right? Why is that important? Because you have to learn how to distinguish between feeling and willing. I wrote an article before. One of my students liked it so much because she was, it's hard for me, well, especially that time we didn't have universitas yet, as we have now as a foundation. I usually just give counseling to men. So I don't want to claim expertise on something I don't. So I didn't have experience with women when it comes to counseling. And so I said, there's a student who was asking me about her love life or something like that. I told her, okay, I wrote an article about it. Let me just give it to you. And the main gist of that article was this: love more than feeling is willing. It's like love more than, it exists more than in the will than in the feelings, right? But it doesn't mean that you don't have feelings. It's gonna be so strange that how can you love someone and you don't feel good being with that person, right? But the moment you make that decision, even if that person is not likable anymore, for example, you get married, that person is not likable anymore, because at a certain point, all of us will not be likable. We have to admit that. There's something in us that may turn off people, right? But precisely love is that, right? It's not just when someone feels good or someone is advantageous to you, right? So you have to learn how to distinguish, especially as a leader, between feeling and willing, right? I like it, but I don't want it. One of my favorite examples is, for example, you're diabetic, right? And there's cake in front of you and you love that cake, right? Oh, me, I love ice cream. Ice cream, wow, it's ice cream. And you know that thing is not good for you. You're diabetic, right? You can say, I like it. I like ice cream, but I won't take it. When you say that, then you realize there's something inside you, right, that tells you that you can go above. What is that? That's your will, right? You understand what I'm trying to say? I honestly feel strange talking to this button in front of my computer. Anyway, as long as you tell me you can hear me, I'm okay with it. So,
we can hear you, Oliver.
Okay. So, you now know the difference between, okay, I like doing this, I like to do this, but I won't do it because it's not good for me. It's not good for the organization. It's not good for the country. You understand? For example, now you're in quarantine or you're in lockdown. I don't know your situation there, but you may feel like going out. Honestly, I'm itching to go out, right? But I always remember my friends in the hospital. Oh, I have a dear friend in the hospital. A friend who's in the front lines. Emil is there in the front lines, and he always tells me, stay at home. You understand? Oh, so I feel like going out, right? But I remember them, right? Then I tell myself, no, I won't. I won't do that. So you see that you have that will. And that's why people who know how to master their feelings more than the others, we can say they have more willpower than the others, right? Why is this important? It is important for making moral choices, because as a leader, you'll be making moral choices in the future. You have to distinguish between a feeling and a consequent emotion, because when you feel something, there's an emotion that comes out, right? You cannot control that. That's, you can say that's subjective, right? Do you commit anything bad when that happens? No. I mean, what can you do? It's just an emotion, right? That's different from judgment and a consequent decision. I'm gonna do it, even if it doesn't happen. You understand? So let's say you feel good with another lady and you're already married, right? Sure, it's a feeling and it's an emotion. You want to be with her. And yeah, sure. And don't worry about it because you know you didn't cause that, right? It's different when you make a judgment. I'm gonna go out with her tonight, right? Even if it doesn't happen. You understand? So that one, the second point has moral consequences, right? That's the only one that carries more responsibility. It makes you distinct from an animal. An animal doesn't have a choice. I mean, you cannot tell the dog you throw a steak at the dog. You cannot tell the dog, hey, it's Good Friday today. You have to fast. It cannot control itself. It acts according to its emotions. It doesn't have intellect and free will, right? That's why one of the things that you have to know as a leader is that you have to learn how. That's sometimes the most difficult thing, especially if everyone in the group is very emotional about something. Right? I was just reading one of them. He tells them, okay, let's discuss this later. And what he does was to talk to them one by one. What is your problem about this? And then in talking to them one by one, then people started to realize their feelings subside. And then when they meet together again as a whole, as a group, then they make a decision together. Okay, that's one thing he does. So how do you start? On the practical side, so there are two, we just spoke about starting knowing yourself deeply. And now on the practical side, usually it starts with little things, the little things that you can do each day. I'm sorry. Remember this this thing, MG made a very nice illustration here. In the first, that's yourself, and you know 1,000 miles starts with a single step. So you start with little things that you can do every day. You know that the things that you do develop in you a predisposition to that thing, right? A habit, right? So just remember, don't say, oh no, this is nothing, it's not gonna it doesn't hurt others. You know, that's what other people usually say, but it hurts you because it creates in you a disposition for that thing, right? Oh, nobody sees that I'm doing this, I'm just in my room, this bad. Sure, perhaps nobody sees it, but it creates a predisposition inside you. That's why you have to be careful, right? In developing those things, right? So don't get used, for example, to bad manners, no matter how small they are. My vision for Universitas that you have people with leaders with good manners, huh? In such a way that people can say, oh, this kid is well brought up, right? Such that in case you are not well brought up by your parents, we will bring you up well in Universitas, right? And no matter how small they are, don't get used to them with bad manners, right? And you know, for some people, when they start realizing that, oh, they have this character or bad character, right? What some people start, that's the last thing you can do. You know, you have, as a leader, you have to learn how to, you know, to be humble and to acknowledge that, okay, this one is not good, I'm gonna work on it, right? That's why one of my favorite saints, Saint Jose Maria, he said, don't say that's the way I am, it's my lack of character. He said, no, it's not your lack of character. He said, no, it's your lack of character. Don't say, he said, don't say that's the way it's my character. He said, no, it's your lack of character. Estuvir, he said. Estuvir means be a man. But look at the vir. Vir actually virtue, right? That's why virtue is from the Latin strength or manliness, right? And you know that virtues develop our personality. As we grow in virtue, we become a better person. And that's why we say that our leadership course in Universitas, which we call Leading Leaders, is of leadership. And many of the failures in leadership are, for me, the way I get it, the way I evaluate it. And, you know, I always think about these things. Although I'm far away from the Philippines right now, I always think about our country. Many times there are failure in virtue. If you remember during the first talk, I talk to you about that speech that we gave for the TOS. It's not the crisis brought about by the social ills plaguing our country, but in the ultimate sense, a moral crisis. And I would say, for this talk, it's actually a crisis in virtue. Think about it. All the things I explained to you today, it's a crisis in virtue. Today I was tested in virtue, being patient. You know, I remember when we things do not turn out so well. One of my friends would joke, "Oh, Oliver is going to, you know, they know my temper." You know? So that we have to work on. That's why it's good for us to identify, right, the virtues that we have to work on. I call it the hierarchy of virtues. Right? Make a list of the things that you have to work on. Speak about them with your mentor. In fact, that's one of the first things that you have to do in mentoring in Universitas. What are the things that I have to work on, right? MG made a very nice illustration here. For example, start with the lead you to all the rest that you have to work on. For example, you make a list of the things that we have here: diligence, prudence, honesty, chastity, sincerity in general, etc. Make a list and then start with one that will make you lead you to the rest. You know, St. Thomas Aquinas said that virtues are like the fingers of your hand. If one of them grows, all the rest grows, right? So if you work on one, the others actually grow together with it, right? So for example, we can start with diligence. We spoke about this last week, 2 weeks ago. Diligence is love for work, right? And then it will help you to be industrious, for example, to give your best effort in what you do. It helps you to be strong, to live fortitude. You don't care about the difficulty. You do what you're supposed to do. You come to work on time. You finish on time. By the way, punctuality is not just starting on time, but also finishing on time. Especially, for example, you have to be home for dinner to be with your family. You live order. You follow a schedule, right? You live well with others, conviviality. Right? I got that from Spanish, convivir. So, and charity, you help others, you love them, right? Decency, you are conscious of being tidy and well dressed. You know, one of the comments I received 2 weeks ago, that's why I appreciate your comments. Please send them, is to dress up well. So that's why I'm dressed up well again, because last time I was not. Right? If you notice, this computer is on top of 2 books. One of my book in molecular biology and the other one in law. My two fields, right? And why? Because someone said, please put your computer on top of something so that we don't see your ceiling, right? So anyway, so modesty, avoiding coarse manners, for example. Purity, you keep your mind clean so that you will think well of others all the time. That many times we judge others because we don't have purity of mind, right? And then responsibility, being able to respond to the task at hand, reliable, for example. Then it leads you also to piety, you know, finding time for your children if you're a parent, to your parents if you're the child, and of course, praying, time for God, and knowing that everything that you have are actually, given to you, they're gifts. Then you learn to be humble, right? So this illustration is trying to tell you that you may have a lot of things to work on. Start with one, and then the rest, it will bring you to the rest. Why? Because anyway, formation is a lifelong process. It never ends. You like that? You like that photo? So what are the 3 key takeaways for today's talk? Are good habits. I can't read because my computer is acting up. So these are stable dispositions that make a person good and do good. They pertain to our nature. That's why you spent a lot of time discussing with you human nature, that you're made up of body and soul. And so your virtues it's good for you to act according to your nature, use your intellect and your feel. The second, moral values are objective. If you constantly repeat them, they predispose you to good habits, virtues. They form your character and they're manifested in your lifestyle. And then the third, it's good that you make a personal hierarchy of virtues. Start with the key virtue that will lead you to the rest, and please ask your mentor for help. For the next talk, I would like you to watch this movie, Man for All Seasons. There are different versions, but this is the best for me, the one of Paul Scofield. You can see it here. So thank you for listening.